Now let's start. May I ask, what is biodiversity? Anyone? Is it that difficult a question?
Um, Sir, biodiversity is when there's a variety of different species in an ecosystem. So,
Okay,
should I
that
define it? What? You need to be
okay,
complex on it?
that's I think you should divide it a little bit more because what you just said a while ago is species diversity. So what else? So we can start looking at a perfect definition by intertwining genetic species and ecosystem diversity together. And that is what biodiversity is. So okay, so here what? So I'm gonna go through some slide, and then we're gonna look at I'm gonna re-ask the question what biodiversity is. Right? So starting off and looking at ecosystems and biodiversity, we know that ecosystems cover much of the Earth's surface. Right? We know that the Earth is really right an amalgamation right of all these different ecosystems, all these different um climatic zones and varying conditions, right? Varying from arid deserts such as the Sahara to cold tundra such as Siberia, right? We have all these different areas and climatic conditions that contribute to or support diverse ecosystems, right? Within these ecosystems, right, there are a variety of different organisms that can be found within the ecosystems due to variation, evolution, via natural selection, and speciation. We can have the arrival of different genetic traits into the biome of different species, not into the biome, into the genome, right, of different species, right? So we could speak about what's happening here. It's really a complex topic, and we're gonna be discussing everything about it, right? Now, the biomes specifically. There are general biomes that we have. We have wetlands, right, specifically that we could look at. Right, let's look at what it is. Biomes are classified according to the species, right, that live in the location. So temperate range, soil type, and the amount of light and water that are unique to the particular place, right? And form the niches for specific species as well, right? There are generally five main biomes that you guys can really categorize, right? Including the tropical rainforest, temperate forest, taiga, temperate grassland, savanna grassland, different types and subcategories also exist, right? So there was a wetland, right? What ecosystem would this be? This would be a marine ecosystem, right? So coral reef, right? It's like that. This would be a savanna, right? This is the Serengeti, right? And here we have the rainforest. This is actually in a part of Guyana, right? The Amazon rainforest, right? This would be the Sahara. So I'm just using it to show that there are there's a multiplicity of different biomes, right? This is in eastern Siberia here, right? The tundra. So there are many different areas and different biomes that we can talk about. And we're going to be looking at these ecosystems in a biological way to discuss their dynamics, right? So ecosystems are intricate networks of interactions, right? We looked at that before in nutrient cycling and energy cycling, where changes in one component can reverberate throughout the entire system. The resilience of is crucial for their survival and well amid disturbances, right? With examples from Yellowstone and coral reef illustrating this capacity, right? So if we look at coral reef specifically, Caribbean studies students, what happens to the ecosystem themselves, right? When the temperature of the oceans rise, right? We should know what's happening there. Right? Caribbean studies students have done coral reefs over and over again, right? So coral reefs are very important. We know what happens when there are major disturbances and unraveling of the resilience of an ecosystem, right? So in the case of coral reefs, when we have when we have the increasing rate of climate change, right, specifically, right, that will actually push the reaction. I'm gonna speak about a little bit of chemistry right now. Pardon me, but I'm a chemist in theory. So the increase in the temperature will push your equilibrium position to favor the production of acids, right? Different types of acids, for example, carbonic acid, which will increase the acidification levels within the ocean, which then kills off corals via bleaching, right? And then the corals themselves is a keystone species. Lovely, bleaching occurs as Ariana stated, right? Studying these complex systems through methods of mesocosms, right? What is a mesocosm? Let me just ask that there. It's in the syllabus, so what is a mesocosm? Mesocosm. What's that? Anyone? What's that? What's a mesocosm? Anybody has an idea? Don't be shy. Have a go.
I believe it's a experimental place where you would take an aspect of the natural environment in under control conditions.
Okay, lovely. Right, so the mesocosm is generally is an experimental tool, right, that we use to study the environment, the effects of different factors on an environment. So we basically try to recreate a section of the environment, right, under control conditions, and then observe, manipulate the variables, and then observe any type of ecological process that may occur, any type of outcome. All right. So, for example, a fish tank, if you have a fish tank at home, you have just created a mesocosm, right? So, that's a fish tank is an example of a mesocosm, right? It could be a very small fish tank, right? The example of a mesocosm, right? You put different types of stones. Some people put different types of species of fish exist there. Some people put a remora, right, or different types of plant suckers and those type of things, right? Sometimes algae may grow in the plants. You've just created a mesocosm with a fish tank, right? So that's an example of a mesocosm, right? So it's used to provide valuable insights into ecological processes and helps predict responses to environmental changes. All right. So dynamics, an ecosystem function as dynamic systems, right, where biotic and abiotic components interact continuously, leading to changes and adaptations over time. Right, so these systems are characterized by the flow of energy and cycling of nutrients to just sustain living organisms. And this is why we did nutrient cycling, energy cycling before this. So this ties into the dynamics of the ecosystem. All right. So we're generally just looking at it, right? So when we look at the life in an ecosystem, right? So the ecosystem itself really what are the general interactions that we look at here? Right? We have different communities forming, right? We look at competition for limited resources. We look at any type of speciation, allopatric or sympatric. You guys did all of this in Unit 1, right? Done that already, right? Look at natural selection occurring within these systems as well, right? Look at variations arising, right? Looking at those type of things, the resources which organisms compete include different types of organic material, right? Could be prey, they could be competing for the same prey, they could be competing for different plants themselves could be competing for sunlight, right? There are a lot of competitions and in between organisms, right? This is really to make solidify the fact that you know that there are multiple interactions between the species, between organisms within a single um ecosystem, right? Other critical factors that influence community dynamics after communities actually compete for these different things, right? Would have been the physical components, the area factors, right? So the geographical environment, so the habitat's latitude, right? The amount of rainfall that they get, the topography or the elevation, available species, right? We could be speaking about all of these things that can affect the ecosystem specifically, right? So these are important environmental variables that determine which organisms can exist within which particular area, right? And when we look at ecosystem equilibrium now, Then we're going to be looking at how best how best we can understand resilience and resistance, right? So these are two parameters in which ecologists use to look at the dynamics or the equilibrium of an ecosystem specifically. So the ability of an ecosystem to remain at equilibrium in despite of disturbances is called resistance. So the definition is right there. The ability of an ecosystem to remain right at equilibrium in spite of any disturbance is called resistance. Right? So after hurricanes, earthquake, volcanoes, anything, any type of disturbance, right, and the ecosystem replenishes quickly, right? As long as the ecosystem has the ability to remain in equilibrium, that is what we call resistance. The speed now at which an ecosystem recovers, right, equilibrium after being disturbed is called resilience, rather. Resilience, right? So looking at that, so the speed at which it recovers is resilience, right? The fact that it has the ability to recover in the first place is called resistance. All right? So these are especially important when we're talking about the anthropogenic impact on the environment, the human impact, right? So the nature of an ecosystem may change to such a degree, right, that it can lose its resilience entirely, right? This process can lead to complete destruction, irreversible altering of an ecosystem, right? So this is just having a look at ecosystem equilibrium. So resistance and resilience are two terms that you guys need for biodiversity, okay? Biotic and abiotic factors, we know biotic factors to be any living components of plants, animals, different fungi, any type of organism specifically. Those would be the biotic factors within an ecosystem. Our abiotic factors, however, would be all non-living or chemical components, right? So non-living physical and chemical components that we look at. So sunlight is an abiotic factor, soil is a abiotic factor, the pH especially is an abiotic factor, water availability, the temperature, these things, the different atmospheric gases located at different latitudes and our different topographies will be important as well. But there's less oxygen the further you go up. So the organisms that live on high mountain tops will be more adapted to live in an environment with lower oxygen levels, right? So you could think about those type of things, right? Those factors will affect the organisms that can live in specific areas, all right? So symbiosis is the next thing in the topic that we need to look at. Could anybody just describe to me what symbiosis is? Define symbiosis. Alright, something from C-set biology, so define it. Let's go. Go ahead.
Symbiosis is a process by which two organisms wait. Sorry, sir.
No, that's fine. Process by which two organisms what?
Okay, so symbiosis is a process by which two organisms help each other and live together. Here's a name. There's a term for it. Sorry.
There is a term for
The
it.
relationship is mutually beneficial.
Mutually beneficial. Okay. But the thing is,
Mutually.
alright. So I'm not sure whether or not your background has altered your response, right? But symbiosis does entail mutualism, but that's not what this symbiosis is. Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship, but that's not the only thing symbiosis is, right? So mutualism is a part of it, all right? So it's a relationship shared between organisms, blankly, right? Organisms of different species. Different species, that's important. Organisms of different species. That's what we look at for symbiosis. Because if you didn't separate it by species, by definition, if symbiosis could occur between organisms of the same species, every pregnant woman would have a parasite inside her, right? But because the parasite is not of the same species, therefore it's not symbiotic and it's not called parasitism. It's called pregnancy or gestation, right? So look at something like that. So symbiosis really occurs with its relationship between organisms of different species, right? So symbiosis is that, right? So look at it's defined as a close and often long-term interaction between two different biological species, right? This relationship can be beneficial neutral, or harmful to the participating organisms, right? So we're looking at different relationships: mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism. So it plays a crucial role in the structure and function of ecosystems, influencing survival, reproduction, and evolution of involved species, right? So mutualism, the type of symbiotic relationship where both species benefit from the interaction. For example, bees and flowers, right? So bees get nectar from the flowers to make honey, while flowers get get pollination or right? So pollen spread aiding in reproduction, right? What are other mutualistic relationships that you guys can think of? We looked at one in the nitrogen cycle. So any more that we can think of? So see if you can list any, right? If you can write down any for yourself, if you can put them in the chat. So rhizobium, right? In root nodules of plants, leguminous, right? Plants. I know that you can just write plants, but leguminous, and then you write plants. Right, so we have that there. Okay, so that's another example there. Commensalism is a symbiotic relationship in which one species benefits but the other is not helped or harmed. Help nor harm rather, right? So barnacles and whales. So barnacles attach themselves to the skin of whales. They gain mobility and access to food particles in water while the whale is unaffected, right? So we have that there. We also had the egret and the cow, right? That's a OG one. That's one that everybody from CC biology should know. Like in the textbook, right? It's literally the example that they use for commensalism in the CC biology textbook, right? So the egret and the cow, right? Birds with nest in a tree. Okay, that could be seen as commensalism. All right, so we have that there. Okay, everything is there. Should be fine. All right, parasitism now. Parasitism is a symbiotic relationship where one organism, the parasite, benefits and at the expense of the other organism, which is the host. So ticks and mammals. So ticks attach to mammals and feed on their blood, which provides nourishment for the tick, but can harm the host by causing irritation or transmitting diseases. Right. So we have other forms of parasitism. What would be other forms of parasitism? Any other form? We have the mosquito and the human specifically. Any other parasites? I'm not sure what that would be. Alright. We have the tapeworm and the human. Alright, we have stuff like that. So different types of parasites, right? So now let's start looking at biodiversity itself and explain the intricacies right within these structures.